Nicole Kidman has made her first public appearance since her split from Keith Urban.
We've been through a lot together.
We've got a timeline for it now, and the time is...
For nearly 2 decades, the world looked at Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban and saw perfection. A Hollywood actress with a golden smile, a country music superstar with a heart full of melodies. Together, they were the ultimate power couple. A marriage people believed could survive fame, fortune, and the relentless spotlight. The red carpets, the award shows, the casual hand-holding as photographers clicked away. They were all part of the illusion. A fairy tale carefully curated for the public. A story written in headlines and smiles. But what the world didn't see, what the cameras never captured, was the quiet unraveling behind the walls of their homes. In 2025, that illusion shattered. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly. A missed call here, a delayed flight there, a glance that lingered too long on something beyond the room. For years, fans believed in their unshakable love because the couple had mastered the art of showing strength. But strength is exhausting when it must be performed. And when the world demands perfection, even the strongest hearts can fracture. Nicole Kidman, once the darling of Hollywood, had lived through heartbreak before. She had rebuilt her life after a high-profile divorce, raised children in the glare of public scrutiny, and crafted a career that defied expectations. Keith Urban, too, carried his own battles. A history of addiction, the scars of a life spent in the fast lane of fame, and a heart that sometimes sought escape in music, tours, and distance. Together, they had survived storms most couples never face. But survival is not the same as happiness, and the years of compromise, sacrifice, and quiet endurance had begun to take their toll. Then came the moment that would forever change everything. Keith Urban quietly moved out of their Nashville home. No confrontation, no heated argument, just a silent departure that left a family fractured, a world stunned, and a woman forced to confront the unbearable truth. The life she had fought to protect was slipping through her fingers. Within days, Nicole filed for divorce. The papers cited irreconcilable differences, but that phrase barely scratched the surface. Behind it lay decades of love, loyalty, and silent struggle. The world would see the headlines, the media would dissect every move. But the real story, the one no camera could capture, was one of quiet heartbreak, of a marriage that had become a performance, and of a woman finally refusing to protect a man who had stopped fighting for her. This is the story of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, not the story of a flawless Hollywood marriage, but the story of love tested by fame, struggle, and human frailty. The perfect illusion had ended, and the truth, as it always does, was far more complicated, far more emotional, and far more raw than anyone imagined. Long before the heartbreak, long before the silence that would one day speak louder than words, there was a spark, a moment of collision between two worlds that, on paper, seemed so different yet felt destined to collide. It was 2005, at a gala in Los Angeles celebrating Australian talent abroad. Nicole Kidman, at 38, was a Hollywood star at the peak of her career, yet quietly carrying the weight of past loss and public heartbreak. Her first marriage to Tom Cruise had ended in one of the most scrutinized divorces of the decade, leaving her to navigate fame, motherhood, and solitude. Her adopted children, Isabella and Connor, were part of a life she fiercely protected, a family she would go to any lengths to shield. Keith Urban, just a year younger, was already a rising star in country music, a man whose songs spoke of longing, redemption, and the search for stability. To the world, he was confident, charming, a rising force in Nashville. But behind the guitar and the polished smiles was a man still grappling with his own demons: addiction, self-doubt, and a relentless pressure to prove himself. When their paths crossed that night, it was nothing like a Hollywood cliché. There was no instant chemistry screamed at by paparazzi. There was a pause, a moment of hesitation. Keith, intimidated by Nicole's presence, didn't call for months. Nicole, intrigued yet patient, waited. And when the first call finally came, it was the kind of conversation that lasts hours. Words flowing with ease, laughter mingling with vulnerability. Two souls recognizing in each other a mirror of their own hidden scars. By June 2006, they were married in Sydney in a candlelit ceremony that seemed to belong to another era. Intimate, emotional, almost sacred. Nicole in a Balenciaga gown that shimmered under the lights. Keith singing to her, a voice raw with emotion, promising devotion. Friends and family would later describe it as a night where reality and fantasy blurred. But even then, behind the glow of celebration, the first shadows were quietly forming. Just 4 months later, Keith checked himself into rehab for alcohol addiction. For many, this would have been the end. But Nicole stayed. She visited, supported, shielded, and forgave. It wasn't just love, it was a promise to herself, a second chance at the family she had almost lost, a refusal to give up on someone she believed in. The next few years were a delicate balance. Publicly, they were Hollywood's perfect couple. Privately, they navigated tours, long nights, and the relentless weight of expectation. In 2008, they welcomed Sunday Rose, and in 2010, Faith Margaret joined their family. For a while, it seemed the fairy tale had found its rhythm. But fairy tales are fragile, and beneath the smiles and family photos, a quiet tension began to grow. Keith's tours pulled him away for weeks at a time. Nicole's film projects took her across continents. Their love, once a sanctuary, became stretched thin by distance, fatigue, and the constant performance demanded by fame. It was during this period that the first cracks appeared. Missed calls that became days, absences that became weeks, small misunderstandings that were quietly stored like unspoken debts. The spark remained, yes, but it flickered against a backdrop of exhaustion, expectation, and unspoken resentment. By the time the world cheered at their public appearances, Nicole and Keith were performing not just for the cameras, but for each other, trying to keep alive a connection that was quietly fraying. And while fans saw love, the truth was far more complex. Love exists, but sometimes it is not enough. By the mid-2010s, the world saw Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban as the ultimate Hollywood Nashville power couple. Red carpets, award shows, music videos, and magazine spreads painted a picture of enduring love. But behind the polished smiles and camera flashes, a quiet tension had begun to grow. Distance was no longer just physical, it became emotional. Keith was constantly on tour, performing for thousands, living nights that stretched endlessly into early mornings. Nicole, meanwhile, juggled demanding film schedules across continents. Home, once a sanctuary, became a fleeting concept. A space where two exhausted adults tried to synchronize lives that refused to line up. Conversations once rich with intimacy were reduced to brief check-ins. Messages were left unread, calls went unanswered, and shared plans dissolved under the weight of unspoken frustration. Friends noticed the subtle changes first. The way Nicole would flinch at forced public affection. The way Keith seemed impatient at quiet moments together. Despite these cracks, both fought to maintain appearances. On red carpets, their smiles never faltered. In interviews, they spoke of unwavering commitment, love, and partnership. Yet the illusion was increasingly difficult to sustain. The perfect marriage that fans had admired for nearly 2 decades was beginning to feel like a performance. By 2023, insiders whispered of quiet separations within the household. Keith's tours were longer, Nicole's projects more consuming. They were coexisting in the same home but living parallel lives, each retreating into work to avoid the confrontation their hearts both feared and needed. Nicole, who had spent years protecting her family and healing others, found herself drained. She had been the constant, the caregiver, the glue holding their marriage together. Keith, once dependent on her support during rehab, now sought freedom in distance, perhaps even at the cost of connection. The first public sign of fracture came subtly. Nicole appeared alone at a few events, and Keith's social media posts hinted at new energy. Rejuvenation or distraction, nobody could tell. Fans speculated, journalists questioned, but neither spoke openly. The tension was a silent crescendo, building toward an inevitable breaking point. Early 2024 marked a turning point. Nicole was filming Practical Magic 2 in London, a project demanding focus and long hours. Keith, meanwhile, quietly arranged his own residence in Nashville. To friends, it appeared a logistical decision. To Nicole, it was the first hint that the man she had loved and protected might already have begun to walk away. Months passed, with Nicole still believing they were navigating a rough patch. She held on to hope, her faith in their marriage a lifeline she refused to release. But when Keith made no effort to maintain proximity or emotional engagement, the reality became unavoidable. By June 2024, the separation was no longer private. They lived apart, their communications limited to logistical matters for their daughters. The public still saw smiles and appearances, but the intimacy had vanished. For Nicole, the silence was deafening. For Keith, the distance was perhaps liberating, or maybe a silent acknowledgement that the marriage had reached its natural conclusion. The final public appearance together was a soccer match in Nashville on June 20th, 2024. Observers described them as awkward, distant, like actors forced to share a stage after the curtain had fallen. Friends say that night, Keith made his decision to leave the marital home for good. Nicole returned from London to find an empty house, a quiet, permanent absence that words could not soften. The public learned of the divorce on September 30th, 2025, but insiders confirm Keith had already signed his portion weeks earlier. Nicole's filing, citing irreconcilable differences, was a formality, a necessary step toward closure, rather than a trigger for separation. Keith's rare admission that he had blown it to smithereens shocked fans and critics alike. Unlike the polished public statements Hollywood couples typically deliver, this confession was raw, unfiltered, and painfully honest. For years, people had looked at them as proof that love could survive fame and pressure. With a single phrase, Keith acknowledged that the marriage had faltered, mostly under his own weight. Rumors swirled about a potential other woman, fueled by moments on tour with younger guitarist Maggie Ball. Videos, playful stage interactions, and social media speculation ignited the tabloids. Yet neither Keith nor Maggie confirmed the rumors, leaving the public to wonder, was this an emotional connection or simply a reflection of the pressures and distractions inherent in Keith's life? The suspense of the unknown heightened the drama. Nicole remained largely silent, refusing to confirm or deny speculation. The media frenzy amplified the sense of betrayal, while fans grappled with the tension between fantasy and reality. The couple who had once embodied hope and stability became a cautionary tale about the fragility of love under relentless public scrutiny. Behind closed doors, Nicole's focus shifted entirely to her daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret. The public image of the perfect wife dissolved into the private struggle of a mother striving to protect her family. The custody arrangement, Nicole's request for primary residential custody, reflected a desire not for control, but for stability. She wanted to shield her children from upheaval, to maintain a sense of home amid chaos. Keith, while grappling with guilt and reflection, focused on music and personal reinvention. Reports suggest that his upcoming work may draw from the turbulence of this period, turning private pain into artistic expression. Both parents, despite personal hurt and public scrutiny, remained committed to co-parenting, a shared priority amid a relationship that had ended but whose responsibilities persisted. The emotional toll extended beyond logistics. Friends say Nicole struggled with feelings of betrayal and heartbreak, compounded by the knowledge that she had fought for a marriage long after the other partner had emotionally checked out. The silent drift, which had grown over years, became a wound finally exposed to the public gaze. Nicole Kidman's journey after the split highlights resilience. For decades, she had rebuilt her life after public heartbreak. Now, facing another end, she applied the same grace and strength. She returned to her work, prioritized family, and reclaimed her private life. The silence that once felt unbearable became a shield and a space for reflection. Keith Urban, too, faces a new chapter. Honest about mistakes and personal struggles, he confronts the consequences of choices long in the making. His confession, messy, vulnerable, and unguarded, serves as a rare glimpse into the humanity behind the celebrity. The story of Nicole and Keith, now complete in its first chapter, is both cautionary and inspiring. It reveals the pressures of fame, the fragility of even the strongest love, and the personal cost of public life. It also emphasizes resilience, accountability, and the enduring bond of family, even when romantic love dissolves. Hollywood may never again see a couple quite like Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban. For years, they symbolized hope, love, and the possibility that two demanding careers could coexist with family and affection. Yet their story reminds us that human emotions, exhaustion, and unmet needs can disrupt even the most admired partnerships. In the aftermath, Nicole walks forward with dignity, prioritizing her daughters and her own peace. Keith faces the consequences of years of choices, personal battles, and public scrutiny, but also a chance to grow anew. The end of their marriage is not just an ending, it's a transition, a reminder that life is messy, love is complex, and sometimes the hardest battles are fought quietly, behind closed doors. The world witnessed a fairy tale unravel. But what remains is a lesson in honesty, accountability, and resilience. Two people who loved, who fought, who ultimately chose survival, both for themselves and for the family they built. And perhaps, in that truth, there is a kind of beauty the cameras never captured.
Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more dives into Hollywood's hidden history.